You have a question, honey? You raised your hand.
No, I've read everything.
Yeah. Well, I can start us off with a little question, which is for Beatrice. Because in the end of your presentation, I can actually sit down because I don't know why I'm standing there. In the end of your presentation, Beatrice, you said that this kind of interaction with the NGO field and the policy field you saw as particular for Romania. And I found that interesting because I've worked in policy as well, not in Romania. And I sometimes see more similarities between NGO fields than differences. And so I was wondering, why did you conclude in your thesis that this was particularly, like what was so particular about the NGO field here, and how does it relate to NGO fields in other places?
I could only speak from my own experience of having worked in environments, NGO environments outside Romania. But again, it's not, it's a bit like comparing apples to pears, because outside I worked in a humanitarian context, and here working in a social context. But then in the end, there were still NGOs. So the structure, let's say, could be the same, and the mission per se. But I guess it's because it also depends on the type of NGO you are. Because like, again, if you work in if you're a social NGO, it will be different compared to working on environment. Or it's a different. The target group you work with is different. The question was why I saw more differences than similarities, right? In terms of relationship with the state, because this was the main activities that I was involved in before in the other context. Perhaps in Romania, because of the history of NGOs, the fact that before communism there was no possibility to associate. After that, there was this boom. I wouldn't say boom, but a lot of NGOs who were born with the desire of working more on aspects related to building democracy. And those working on social issues, for example, they appeared over time, but they were less present than the first category. And these NGOs working on social issues, they appeared exactly because they had to complement the gaps of what the state was supposed to do. And nowadays, there are many more than before, which means that there are even more gaps, which is in a way weird, because you would think there would be a positive evolution, but not necessarily, as we can see. And that is a problem. But at the same time, it can also be seen as a solution. It means that in the end, vulnerable population has more services that they can benefit of, right? But I'm not sure if I answered your question right, because I'm sure I understood it very good. But yeah, I mean, if I need to run out further, I can just interview later.
Yeah, well, it's for them, not for us. Because we just came here to talk about our work, and my dad's motivation is. But I'm just curious, for you guys that came to listen to us, if anybody could share something about their own motivation, what brought you here today? Yeah. Because it's more of us than you now. You that the roles have been reversed. So you are the panel, we are the public. Okay, I think if nobody wants to, I might have a question for you. Nobody wants to say anything. What about you, Nicoletta? Because I know you saw. I think I can put you on the spot safely.
There is a conversation here to make me disappear. Well, I'm here because I have been asked to be here. It's part of the organizing committee. So she had to. She's having us. I work here, so it's basically.
And otherwise, you would stay.
Of course not, because it is not Anthropology is here, and I like. Why am I looking at me like this?
Because your topic.
I know. But I actually have a question for her that I was going to ask after. Because my dream is to work with vulnerable people. Because in the past I was a vulnerable person. And I would like to ask you if you have any kind of advice, or if you have any kind of memory about the first time when you interviewed a vulnerable person, because the first time I did it, I didn't feel good. I was very sad. I was actually angry that I couldn't do more for that person or for them in general. And I'd like to ask you, if you remember, how did you feel? And maybe if you have any advice for somebody that is very sensitive like I am, because I actually cry for everything in general. So if you'd like to share something.
What a beautiful question.
Hard. Thank you. I can't remember, but I don't think that I ever made a proper interview. I actually kind of just sit around and talk to the people in general, because I imagine that for people within vulnerable groups, this sort of conversation one-to-one, it can be really stressful, and I don't imagine that it would be comfortable for them to be engaging like that with a stranger, which I would be at the beginning of the process. And that's why I said that it is a very long process from my point of view, doing research into vulnerable areas. Because actually, and I know it could sound a little bit cynical maybe, but it's not. You just get to be friends with those people at some point and just trust you to tell you things. And you don't have to ask questions, that's my view on the situation. I don't remember a moment in which I got a paper with some questions and just sit and talk with that person. And on the part with the sensibility, again, there are things that could look for us very small, but that could make a lot of difference for people who have nothing actually. And because you said that you were frustrated and upset that you didn't do more. For them, it's more anything that could be of support. This is what I come to learn in this work, because they receive maybe nothing. So something is more than nothing. So I really think that whatever kind of small intervention, meaning again, just to read it to them, not just spoken on something one person because she couldn't understand how much did she have to pay for the electricity bill because it's in new lei and she doesn't understand she wants me to translate it into the milioane, the old. And she was really happy because she understood how much she has to pay for that bill. And really, this is something important. If you have time and just give them the time, you'll see that you can be of great help, I think, from my perspective. Thank you.
If I can add something, from also my experience, just the basic interest in the fact that they have something to say is important to them, because most of the time they don't feel heard and they don't feel like people are listening to their problems. And having someone there who is interested in that story is also valuable. For instance, when I was going into deep questions on a more general first question, I saw how they sometimes they even ask themselves, why are you interested in this? Why do you want to know this? And telling them, being honest and open, shows them that there's still people out there who maybe are not interested in this story because they want to sell something out of it, but because they're genuinely interested to know and to help. And it's difficult sometimes because they also ask for, they also have, maybe they have expectations, promises, as in, will you help me take my story further and help me be listened? And then you tell them, I can't promise anything. It's very difficult. And that's also the sensible part where you don't know sometimes maybe how to react. But I guess you learn that with trying to place yourself in more similar circumstances, expose yourself to talking freely to these categories.
So I wanted to add something. I remember first time I started studying anthropology, I was very much drawn towards extreme vulnerable groups. You know, my first interview studying anthropology was with a Romanian prostitute in Amsterdam that had been sex trafficked from her village into Amsterdam. And I was like, yes, this is what an anthropologist does. You go to the most vulnerable groups and then you kind of try to hold space for their stories. And it was very heavy for me. I cried, it took me 3 days to kind of like even come back into myself. And then I asked my supervisor for help. And I still remember, he said, well, I think that we need to enter with care in these spaces of deep pain and hurt. And sometimes you need to start practicing this because you have vulnerable people are all around you. You know, it's just that if you go to the extreme vulnerable groups, you have to be able to carry and hold space for all the pain that they hold. You have to share that space with them. And if you're not ready for that, now, this is what you will get. So he advised me to say, why don't you look at everybody around you of somebody that has a certain vulnerability and practice sitting in those spaces of vulnerability with them. You know, ask questions, be empathetic, share your own struggles, your own pain, see what comes back, and kind of practice that dialogue of vulnerability because it's everywhere around you, and use it to kind of then reflect
what does it do to you? And kind of increase this muscle of sensitivity and empathy, you know? So then I thought at that time, makes sense for me because I left that conversation with that Romanian prostitute feeling a lot of shame of being a bad anthropologist. And then I realized, well, yeah, but this, you know, sitting in spaces of extreme vulnerability is very difficult. And yeah, it's a process. I don't know if it's helpful.
For my case, I haven't had the opportunity or the chance so far to work with the vulnerable groups in the same way that I believe you were asking those questions. From my experience and what I've done a lot, and I think I go a little bit with what's been said before, it's just being there to hear the stories of these people, of someone, really, does bring a lot more than sometimes we think about it. A lot of times no matter the subject, the matter, the point you're trying to get, you'll get people that just started speaking, and you know, sometimes you just want to let out something, so it kind of does help. And sometimes maybe not be even close to what you want to hear or see or get at that point, but it still helps those people. A lot of people have that. From my experiences, as I said, a little bit of empathy, a little bit of being there. It tends to be sometimes depending on the situation. My biggest experience in this idea was work with them with healthcare and health support in hospitals, where we talk with, try to talk with patients and people related to the patients, their mothers, brothers, families. And yeah, sometimes the stories can be heavy, some people have like a rough time in their lives, and sometimes it does help to talk a little bit about it, to speak a bit with them. Some work with, for example, people that have situations like chronic cancer, which is kind of hard, and yeah, it's a little bit of being there, and it's hard at first if you're not used to it. For me, I had the chance to already have some experience going into this, so I have a little bit of training on what to do, but it still hits you a lot harder than you're expecting some situations. And again, it's trying to keep the focus, but at the same time be empathetic, to try to understand people. Sometimes being an anthropologist is more about letting people speak. Really, sometimes you just let them go for 10, 20 minutes and just let it go out, because it helps really. And even in a practical sense, obviously, if you're trying to help people, and they said sometimes you go to some places, some situations where it's really hard to get information at first because people don't trust you, they don't know who you are, they don't care about that. And sometimes just sitting there, talking to them, taking their relation will help in the long term, because people tend to be more open to it if they feel you are there to listen to them. So I think that's probably my takeaway. I would say, like, if you want to work with this, about the practice, about the empathy, talk about having some experience, having some vulnerabilities in your life.
words, we are like their psychologists for a moment. And I guess that's something that we learn on the way and on the job. And for me, that was what helped me go through these more difficult phases. Is that it's hear them and talk to them and treat them like people. That's the key, I guess. So that's my experience. It was only that time that I was doing interviews with a vulnerable group. So let's see what the future holds.
I was listening to you all, and these are, I think, really all good tips and perspectives, but I also wanted to add something else. I have not yet in my life met any group of people that don't experience any type of pain. And I think for me, from my own background, I looked up to people with a certain amount of power and wealth, and I thought those people don't have pain. But the reality is everyone does. And so what I've learned to do over time is when I'm sitting with a person, it doesn't matter if they are rich or poor, or if they can walk or not walk, or if they have everything or nothing. In that moment, what they need can be really small. We need the translation, we need a letter we don't understand. Like an elderly rich person can also not understand their letter and also need that help. And I've started to think, but this is, my work experience has mainly been in social housing, where there's huge waiting lists in the Netherlands, and it was my job to write policy, and that means you have to choose who gets to go first. And that means also you have to choose who doesn't get to go first. And so there was just a point where I thought, all these people have a story, I can sit and empathize with them and listen to what they need. And I stopped thinking about some people as more vulnerable than others. There was a point where I realized that that was my frame, that I was putting on them. I decided for them that they have less than someone else. But maybe that person that I see as vulnerable, maybe they have a ton of friends. And somebody else who is very rich and they sit alone in their house, they don't have any friends. And if you ask some people who are economically poor whether they are worse off than that person who is alone, they will say, no, I have way more than that person who is alone. My life is better than theirs. You know, so maybe it's not up to me to define how much somebody has. And maybe it's not up to me to say, this person is more vulnerable than that person, you know? And you just listen to, like, this is what they say they need. This is what I can offer them. Like, maybe I can help you call the city council person. Maybe I can help you apply for a subsidy. And maybe I can't. Maybe I can just sit and listen to you, right? But all those things can be enough in their own time. Okay, we've gone on about this for a long time. I would love to hear another question if there are any.
I actually have a question for you, but I think it can be extended to everyone. What role do you think that anthropology plays in addressing contemporary social and cultural issues, like challenges, in the Dutch society or in your country's society?
Should I go first? Can you go? I think in every society, the role of anthropology is to be next to other ways we gather information about humans. So I think we tend to, as a society, we tend to look at statistics. We like to put in the newspaper 54% of people disagree with this statement, but we don't know why they disagree with it. They don't know what is behind their thinking, and I think anthropology is always there to find information that other
ways of researching cannot find. And I think they complement each other. We need both. We need all of them. That's what I.
I also think that we live in a world right now that is increasingly polarized, where black or white or positions and opinions are very fixed and very rigid and very ultimatum. It should be like this or like that. And I think anthropology brings a lot of nuance to any perspective. So that if you think you have a point of view, then there are 3 ethnographic accounts that will tell you that no, the reality in that part of the neighborhood or in that part of your city is completely different. And I think we need to, I don't want to speak as for the Dutch society, but I think in general we need more increased ability to sit with contradictions and complexity, and be able to engage in spaces of conversation across contradictions and complexity to come up with better ways of living together as communities. I think anthropologists are so well equipped to do that. If you have an anthropologist in a debate or in a facilitated space, they will be able to break that polarity in any conversation. And I've seen it happen so many times. Either you call them a researcher or a community manager or whatever, they automatically do that because of this training that we have. So I think we need more and more of that. And I also believe anthropology should be taught in high schools, mandatory to everybody. I think it's a beautiful lens to learn how to be a human in the world, irrespective of whatever profession then you choose to follow. Maybe even earlier than high school, if it's possible. That's my opinion. Here you go. Baby school. Anthropology. You learn Foucault at 5 years old. Power moves around. It's not fixed. That would be wonderful. Yeah. Sorry.
I can go next. I think thinking a bit about what Rosalie said, I think the greatest value we can have in today's society is the why of the question. One example I can give you from a previous work we've done, we work with mobility, about how can we improve systems of digital mobility to help people to better guide themselves in the city, and to specifically with parking zones. And for example, one of the big questions that the company we were working for at the time wanted to know is, would people change their provider? Because there are many ways to do that payment. Will they change their provider to us? Obviously, a lot of people will say yes, but the part that they don't understand sometimes is why would they change? Because obviously, if you ask people if you would change from this to that, absolutely. Why? Right? Would it be because it's cheaper? Because it's more convenient? Because it gets better stuff than the other? Again, the why is really important, and I think we are at a time where a lot of people don't really look at the why. It's more about the statistics. And also, I think I will go again with the question of empathy, because I think it's really important. A lot of problems with the polarization that Corina talked before. A lot of people feel very protective of their own opinions so far, because a lot of times what I found out is a lot of people relate their own opinions to themselves as a person. So basically, they are their own opinion, and it's beginning to happen more and more and more. And sometimes you just need someone to break that off, because what you're going to get when you do a discussion, debate, or it becomes almost a stalemate, because most people feel like a question or a challenge to an idea is a challenge to themselves as a person. And it's not. Sometimes yes, most of the time it's not. And we are able to do that break-off. We are able to look at it from a different perspective, to try and frame it in a different light. Because of the we have, we can see every single angle of it and try to understand why does it exist, why do people feel like this, like that, what would make them think a different way, what would make them hear something different. I think that's probably the most important thing. Again, first of all, to understand the why of something, not just because how it is done, but why is that it has been done. And second, that idea of creating that empathy bridge to start losing so much of the polarization you have so far with politics and anything that is that would be answered.
I just wanted to add that links to everything that Paul said, that anthropology can be really useful in navigating change, because we live in a world that's changing patterns, ways of thinking, ways of doing things, like showing the context in which certain beliefs came to be, certain practices. So when you are able to do that, then you are not so attached to them, and you can things can flow easier, and you can also understand change, you can understand the context and where things are coming from. So it's another bigger part.
Let me end in a second. There's an anthropologist, Liliana Ted, I think, I don't know if she's editor-in-chief in Financial Times, and she wrote a book, Anthrovision, and explained very well why anthropology is very necessary, especially in politics design, because experts in policy design are, in a way, looking at the people with an eagle-eye view. So that means that it's, in a way, extracted from the context, and then they work on different kind of economic politics. And on the other hand, anthropologists are looking with a warm-eye view. It's a more granular level, let's say, and they discover a new view, a new perspective, and add knowledge to policy design. I think that's the main advantage, I would say, and this is why anthropology can be related to many fields. You can add anthropology to economics, you can add anthropology to politics, you can add anthropology to, I don't know, financial markets, to everything. It would be better to have an anthropologist in all these places, so to add knowledge to this kind of things that are, in a way, up in the sky.
Just add to that. Closing the circle. I think that anthropology could also empower population. Basically, I think it's among the most humble science, because the better anthropologist you are, the better is the process of just letting the people among whom you've been for years and studied things to speak for themselves. For me, this is kind of the superpower of anthropology, and it's kind of the same thing that you say, but I think that it is among the sciences that does this at the highest level, empowering people, communities.
Are there other questions? Oh.
So, I believe there is a constant struggle for anthropology as of lately for it to become more accessible to the mainstream public. I think that if you actually observe conversations and discussions on social media, you will already come upon anthropological concepts such as gentrification, colonialism, and so on. So I think that it has already pretty much reached the large public. So I think it is time to take the question even further. I'm wondering if should or could people not formally taught in anthropology through college be trained and encouraged into conducting qualitative research through interviews? Okay, so should we train people that are not anthropologists that haven't finished college or formal education in this regard into conducting qualitative research through interviews?
I think we are all anthropologists even if we don't manage to finish some anthropological specialization. And the best trainer was COVID. You know, the pandemics and the lockdown made us see the familiar strange and strange look familiar in a way.
Looking at the world as an anthropologist.
So, no, not really. I wonder if in every group of people of any background, you could have at least an informal anthropologist which would conduct interviews to further, not necessarily research upon it, but at least send those interviews to a center where they can be used for anthropological research.
A network of anthropologists infiltrated in every field. That's
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's a wild idea. I mean, depends on those insights. Like, who would use them? Is it something like that the organization would use the insights, or is it just for the personal growth of the ones that are receiving training? Or I mean, I definitely, like you said, like in every field you could have an anthropologist, and if the particular company or institution is open to integrating insights from an anthropologist, then yeah, I think you could train. Like maybe you wouldn't have so many anthropologists available to hire them everywhere, but you could provide like a module of, and I'm sure you can speak more about that, a module of training for non-anthropologists, right? Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think we said that we definitely want to develop courses in anthropology, but I think I would also like to answer your question with an unequivocal yes, and then I have a very specific example why I say that. I was able to do research for my master's thesis in Uganda, and I was there for 3 months, and at a certain point I wanted to travel around a little bit in the weekend and see something, and I found myself in a hospital room with a girl from the UK and a girl from the US, and they were both working for aid organizations, being paid really well for the age that we all were, to conduct questionnaires and so on. And they had a conversation between the two of them that I sat and listened to, and it's still one of the most bewildering conversations I've been in the presence of in my whole life, because they said, yeah, we go to these villages and we do all these questionnaires, but the people there, they don't want to talk to us unless we give them kilos and kilos and kilos of rice. And it's so annoying, they're really greedy, they want all the rice, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what are you talking about? Like, so I asked them, like, so how do you do the research then? Like, what did the UN tell you to go and do here? What is your job? It turned out that their job was to hire local research assistants who speak local languages, but the local research assistants got a questionnaire, but no training, and the questionnaire had yes or no questions on it. And the goal of the research was to test if, like, 5 years ago, people were taught a certain agricultural method that would, like, help them grow more rice or whatever. And now this was like the evaluation, like, did you use the methods that we taught you, we nice white people taught you how to do this. And so they were supposed to answer yes or no and yes or no on these questionnaires. And I spoke to some of the people from villages, and they said someone comes here every week to ask us the most boring questions. So we stopped doing it for free. Like, we have busy lives. Give me rice, I'll do it. You know? And so I think, yes, we can do a lot better job, particularly when we're speaking about researching them or writing policy about them. I think we should do, as a world, a way better job in training people in qualitative methods, doing actual research in those villages, finding out actually what people need, rather than coming, telling them things, and then coming, did you use my things? Oh no, you must be stupid because you didn't use it, because that were the implications there. And unfortunately, in 3 months in Uganda, I found 100 people like that, and I didn't find anyone who was doing a similar research to my own, and it was depressing to see.
I want to add that we have a saying, especially in Romania, that everybody's an expert in politics and football, and now they're also experts in anthropology. And I think it's when you go on social media, as you said, they talk about colonialism and gender and gentrification, and they use some terms, and it's like, oh, they're anthropologists, but they're not. So we should really understand that we need a qualification. And just as I'm not good at football and politics, although I can speak about those, you should be really aware of what's going on. And I don't know how to put it. For instance, it's hard for me to, many times still, when I'm talking to my friends or people that know me over a beer, I'm going to do research there to find, for instance, up in North Romania, where they have these huge weddings and huge costumes. And I told them, I'm going to go up in North to find out why they're having these huge weddings and why they're wearing the 22 kilos on them. And they said, one woman said, no, I don't have to go there, I'll tell you why. Because they're stupid, So this kind of stuff, or because I wrote an article and because they want to have big houses to brag about that. Okay, but what's behind it? So the thing with anthropology is that it's quite accessible, I mean, we're doing, it's not that I am bragging, but yeah, I'm bragging a bit here. So we're doing really complicated stuff that requires a lot of analysis and theory and knowledge acquired over the many years of studying and research. But we don't have the way we talk, and our topics of research are not as encrypted as for engineers, for instance, or other jobs that have very, very specific language and very specific topics that you could not get into without having very good knowledge of that. Whereas in anthropology, we talk about general ideas, we talk about society topics that gives you the illusion that everyone can be an anthropologist and participate in discussion. Of course, everybody should participate in discussion and talk about society and all that, but it doesn't mean that they are anthropologists. And that's why we need anthropologists and training, and specific training, because we like to believe most of the times we get to the core of the things in a very articulated way. Whereas the other things, when we talk about gentrification, colonization, can be nothing but opinions. Whereas with our sustained research, there are facts supporting a theory, not the opinion of the people engaged in a conversation about what are believed that are anthropological topics.
I wanted to also add something because I used to work in the traditional market research field before moving into anthropology. And I think there's a difference between the ethnographic act and being an anthropologist. Because I think that employing ethnographic methods in how to do research and going into an immersive reality, into somebody else's world, really makes, for me, the anthropologist, like a long timeline with a lot of hard work and theoretization behind it, but being immersed in the ethnographic act gives you a certain sense of engaging with people, of being with people, that it can bring value even if you're not an anthropologist. And I think that if more market research professions will enter the ethnographic act, will go and spend some time with people instead of just reading statistics or instead of just assuming that they know the reality of a certain group. Just by being immersed in their reality, they will see certain things. They will change their point of view. I remember just a short story when I used to work in Brazil, and that was, let's say, my first encounter with anthropology was when I saw a little clip of 5 minutes of a small girl that was 6 crying at a hairdresser salon with her mother because she was going through a very harsh chemical treatment to straighten her hair. And her mother was telling her, don't worry, if you go to your kindergarten with your curly hair, they were both black, you will suffer more than this 5 minutes going to a chemical treatment that is burning your scalp, because you will not be seen by the other children as being less than. So just by seeing that small clip did more to me and my understanding of racism, my understanding of how my own work contributing to that stereotyping, than reading statistics and anything else that I've read before. And I would imagine if I would also have been in that hair salon while that little girl was crying, I would have been even more impacted. So yeah, I do think that this discipline of market research should embrace more the ethnographic act. And it's always a blurry line, right? You do ethnography, are you really an anthropologist if you do ethnography? And that's a very sensitive subject for people that train for years on how they want to be present in the ethnographic act. And being present from a position of neutrality, reflexivity, really understanding these bigger powers at play in a certain context that you're inhabiting, that really takes a lot of effort and training. And yeah, unfortunately, you can't become an anthropologist just by going into an ethnographic process. But yeah, I think it does give you a glimpse of what that process could look like and better.
It sounds like we are all together advocating for like the center that Maria was talking about, when the real deep analysis happens. There's basic anthropology and then there's deep analysis anthropology, right? In a way, like because I think we all.
I mean, I was like, it was what he said involved this image where the center that blends all the insights from the ground.
Yeah. Yeah, but in a way, what we're talking about is, you know, there's a distance, right, between some researchers and some people who research, right? And I think that was where your question came from, right? Can the distance be smaller? And I think depending on who researches and who is being researched, the example that I gave, I think it's good to have intermediaries there. If the researcher has to be white and American and the research subject has to be black and Uganda, it could be useful to have someone in between. Now, why they don't hire Ugandan anthropologists, I will not understand, because there are qualified people there as well, but I cannot change the development world in a day. I wish I could. But at the same time, I really agree with you that the training that you do for years is extremely valuable in being even more neutral and more nuanced in your understanding of people. How's it going here? You want to add anything?
I'm just going to go in the same way that they have talked. I think there's a difference, and that should be the understanding about the ethnographic methods and being an anthropologist. Anyone can do ethnographic methods. It's important, and work with number. If you saw that their whole idea is to give those tools to people to use, even if they're not anthropologists. And a lot of times they're needed. When spoke a lot about market researchers, I would say also about anything about political statements, political views, any type of research or questionnaires or work that you do with public. If you know how to, if you have some idea how to do ethnographic methods, it will help you a lot more to probably get a better result. But to be an anthropologist is quite different. Again, like in any other area, you have to have some training to really get there. I've heard said if you know what you're asking, if you know how you're asking it, if you know what are the questions that can actually give you the information for the problem, you can get a lot of information, but you need to know how to get it there. And that does take time, that takes work. And going to a little bit of said before, yeah, a lot of people on the internet sound and seem a lot of understanding in some questions, but most times it tends to be more of an opinion-based. And in fact, I think that's the real difference. A lot of people will talk and use some very complex words and sounds really well, but it doesn't come from a place of fact or work or research, as a lot of anthropology work does come from. So yeah, the answer to the question is absolutely anyone that does any type of work with other human beings should, and in my opinion, needs to know a little bit about ethnographic work, about relating to people, about, again, the empathy that you can show to get that result. To be an anthropologist is probably a different thing, and I don't think you can get there just by getting those lines. It's a great tool to add to your toolkit if you have them, but at some point you're going to need someone with that training to get there. So yeah, that's my
Oh, that's what you're asking a lot for.
Yeah, I think that was a beautiful summary of what was said. Are there any more questions?
Hi, Barbara.
No, why? You can also ask us our favorite colors. You know, we're very normal people. You have a question? I don't know how are we doing for time also.
We might have another 20 minutes, according to the official, like, if people are still not tired enough, or you want to continue, or stop. We didn't actually discuss, we didn't touch on the way anthropology is communicated to the public and how to reach this message. And I had a question for you, and it wasn't only the question, it's like, first of all, an appreciation, because I know you're very active on social media and you have many followers, and this is like your advocacy work, I guess, took you there. Or like I see you're very active on like interacting with local authorities on social media, and this is, to me, it's a lot of work that you're doing, even if you might not call it work, but it grew, and like people know you, people follow you, and you're definitely making an impact there. I mean, could you tell us anything about that? Or I mean, her reach is 10 times bigger than Anthropologic's reach, you know, so.
Actually, I've done that mainly with many, how to say, memes about Gabriela Filler.
Oh wow, that you were creating yourself?
Yes, Gabriela Filler, the former mayor of the city, and basically half of the city used to nothing. And that's right, it's both a blessing and a curse what's happening there, because that audience actually is built on this mockery. But yes, I think it's important that part of the mayors that are seeing what I'm posting and they are communicating.
They are responding. I mean, you matter to them. They are really like.
I don't know why, honestly, because actually it is a curse in terms of, again, as I said in the presentation, for me this is really heavy, because I know that only posting something on Facebook, and at least I know for sure for mayors at some point would reach that message, and it is kind of, I don't think it's fair, honestly. It would also touch the former mayor, as she sued me for the mockery. It might be effective, I don't know, but for me this situation, that's why actually I started that I'm posting less and less on Facebook, because I think it's unfair to make a local public I know that it's for a good cause, and I'm really trying to keep on with the communication in terms of social justice in Bucharest. But again, I know for sure that at least I know personally tens of people that are struggling to have audience public, or how to say it.
We receive an audience that to
go and talk
and
to
we
the
talk face to
mayors,
face.
yeah,
The local authorities.
and mayors in Bucharest and not do that. So it's kind of, from my point of view, even fair to have the mayors dealers like this and people struggling to do this. But otherwise, what happened there, it was an insane mockery and waste of 4 years of my life.
Yeah, but I guess this mockery was rooted inside.
That's
And
true.
way of
Of
saying
course.
you gathered around with people who share the same like outrage.
Yeah, it was mainly about, I don't know, transparency, public participation, things like that. Because actually I see now that on social inequalities, for example, it's not that of a friendly audience. So it's really important. That's why I'm saying it's both a curse and a blessing, because actually those people are built on those kind of populist right now, in my view, messages. Again, it wasn't anti-corruption, but it was mainly about transparency and public participation. But again, I would go back to what you said, the polarization. Anyway, what's happening on social media? I'm too old for Facebook right now. So it is a lot of, I don't see anything constructive happening there, except for the mayor of District 2, for example, seeing that the mayor of District 6 answered to requests that I have. And in 2 days, the mayor of District 2 called me to ask me to go there and talk to him. So, and as a consequence for that situation, actually he did some things within an informal settlement. He paved some roads there, and currently they are trying to bring some gas and things like that. So it works a bit, but again, I have some ethical issues with this situation.
So I don't speak Romanian, right? So I think if I went to your Facebook page, I probably wouldn't understand a lot of the things. I also don't know about the local politics, but I think what you're touching on is very interesting, because I think, you know, it reminds me also of the question of ACTU, who we worked with in Portugal. They are a human rights organization. They deal with sex trafficking and a lot of serious things that happen. And they said, we only see hate on social media. We don't see anything constructive, right? And I think that is sometimes because people like you, and I don't need to put you in a box, have ethical issues with it. And so then we end up with a social media where only hate can proliferate, because anyone with kind of a sensible or nuanced opinion disappears from it. And this is a very, very big topic, but I find it interesting that you tried, even if you have ethical issues with it, because at the same time it's an acknowledgement that this is one of the ways to get things done in the world that we live in right now.
That's true. Part of my problem is the fact that this is the way that we are doing things. After advocating for more than 10 years to do it officially and complying with some laws that oblige the mayor, for example, to implement some laws within informal settlements.
It reminds me, I was interviewed, I think it was 3 years ago for my podcast. I interviewed this Brazilian social scientist that was also an activist, in kind of in the context of the political setting in Brazil at the time, it still is quite corrupt. It's very difficult in small communities to offer access to good information. So what he did, because he also had a kind of a degree in computer science, he built a love bot on Twitter. So he told me how he said, you know, I'm going to create something that disrupts this polarization in these environments during the political things. And then he built this love bot that would kind of automatically react on a divisive message from a politician or from a campaign with a love message. And it became like really, really popular. But, and then he kind of told me how he thought, well, what can I do? Because I need to be present, like what you say, I need to be present in that space. I need to enter the arena. But then how do I want to enter the arena? Well, how do I want to position myself there? That's a very interesting question. But for him, it was no option not to go into the arena. He said, I can't be, you know, a social scientist that fights against these topics and not be present there. And then it was really funny, the story of his love bot, and he showed me some snapshots. I just wanted to mention this because I also think it's super great to enter that arena. And yeah.
I think also in Romania, the problem is that not just in Romania, but we don't really have public spaces which can help us forward certain messages. And so people tend to use social media for something that they weren't really designed for in the first place. And they pursue them as spaces where they can, maybe they can let go of all their feelings and messages about everything. And it all gets mixed in this huge pile of everything. And yeah, for instance, I'm not a big user of Facebook either. Sometimes I wish I could post every little thing, injustice and problem that I see while walking and living every day in Bucharest. And I realized how much time-consuming that would be. And understanding how much efforts would need to be put there for people to take upon these messages. But in a society also like Romania, Facebook is very much used by politicians and by local authorities to send out messages, and then I think it's, yeah, they use it as a tool to connect with people. But in reality, we need a space to connect with people much more than a platform which was created for more than socializing. And in a space like this where, well, I wish we were more people, but it's good enough like this, and it's a culture that needs to be built, but also spaces to be constructed. And there's so many spaces in Bucharest which are completely unused right now, and they could be turned into civic spaces for young people, for people working in NGOs, for activists to meet with their local counterparts, and etc., etc. So it's, I don't know, it's a mixed way of communicating this, and I think that also if each of us has the power to reach those people that we work with every day and send out certain messages, that will be made with them in a way or another, and go to the next person and so on and so forth. So I guess it's just about yeah, reaching out. As I say, if at the end of the day I go to sleep and think that what I did, whatever could be done in that day, and I feel content of what I've done, then that was a good day for me. And it takes more. Communication is very difficult to have in this sense.
One thought about the social media and Facebook. I'm not sure how accurate the reactions and what we see there. I mean, I'm sure there are many vocal people and comments and maybe nasty stuff, but I wonder how big is the invisible community, like how many of us, like me, let's say, because I rarely comment.
this wasn't a good experience for everyone, and hopefully we'll have more like this.